Hello, my friends. It's Indiana Homes for Story Time, and we're back. We are back to read our novel, The Green Mummy. We begin with Chapter 21, A Story of the Past. Mrs. Jasper's influenza proved to be very mild indeed. When Donna Inez de Gallos and Lucy paid a visit to her on the afternoon of the day succeeding the explanations in the museum, she was certainly in bed, and explained that she had been there since the professor's visit on the previous day. Lucy was surprised at this, as she had left Mrs. Jasper perfectly well, and Braddock had not mentioned any ailment of the widow, but influenza, as Mrs. Jasper observed, was very rapid in its action, and she was always susceptible to disease from the fact in Jamaica she had suffered from malaria. Still, she was feeling better and intended to rise from her bed on that evening, if only to lie on the couch in the pink drawing room. Having thus detailed her reasons for being ill, the widow asked for the news. As no prohibition had been placed upon Lucy with regard to Harvey's visit, and as Mrs. Jasper would be one of the family when she married the professor, Miss Kendall had no hesitation in reporting all that had taken place. The narrative excited Mrs. Jasper, and she frequently interrupted with expressions of wonder. Even Donna Inez grew eloquent, and told the widow how she had defended Sir Frank against the American skipper. "What a dreadfully wicked man," said Mrs. Jasper, when in possession of all the facts. "I really believe that he did kill poor Sidney." "No," said Lucy decisively. "I don't think that. He would have murdered him on board had he intended for the crime to be made, as he could not have done so with more safety. He is an innocent, as is Sir Frank." "And no one dare say a word against him," cried Donna Inez with flashing eyes. "He has a good defender, my dear," said the widow, patting the girl's hand. "I love him," said Donna Inez, as if that explained everything, and perhaps it did, so far as she was concerned. Mrs. Jasper smiled indulgently, then turned for further information to Lucy. "Can it be possible," she said, "that Widow Anne is guilty?" "Oh, I don't think so. She would not murder her own son, especially when she was so very fond of him. Archie told me, just before we came here, that he had called to see her. She still insists that Sidney borrowed the clothes, saying that Archie wanted them. What do you make of that, my dear?" "Well," said Miss Kendall, pondering, "either Widow Anne herself was the woman who talked to Sidney through the Sailor's Rest window and has invented the rest of the story to save herself, or Sidney did get the clothes and intended to use them as a disguise when he fled with the emeralds. In that case," said Mrs. Jasper, "the woman who talked through the window still remains a problem. Again, if Sidney Bolton intended to steal the emeralds, he could have done so in Malta or on board the boat." "No," said Lucy decisively. "The mummy was taken directly from the Sellers' house to the boat, and perhaps Sidney did not find the manuscript until he looked at the mummy. Then Captain Hervey kept an eye on Sidney, so that he could not open the mummy to steal the emeralds. Still, according to your own showing, Sidney looked at the actual mummy. He opened the mummy case, that is, else he could not have gotten the manuscript." Lucy nodded. "I think so, but of course we cannot be sure. But the packing case in which the mummy was stowed was placed in a hold of the steamer, and if Sidney had wished to steal the emeralds, he could have done so without exciting Captain Hervey's suspicions. Then let us say that Sidney robbed the mummy when in the Sailor's Rest and took the clothes he borrowed from his mother in order to fly in disguise. But what of the woman?" Lucy shook her head. "I cannot tell. We may learn more later. Don Pedro has gone to Pierside in search, and my father says that he will send Cockatoo there as soon as he can to join the search." "Well," sighed Miss Jasper wearily, "I hope that all this trouble will come to an end. That green mummy has proved most unlucky. Leave me alone, dear girls, as I feel somewhat tired." Goodbye, said Lucy, kissing her. I hope that you will be better this evening. Don't get up unless you feel quite able. Oh, I shall take my ease in the drawing room. I thought you always called it the parlor, laughed the girl. Ah, Mrs. Jasser smiled. You see, I am practicing against the time when I shall be mistress of the pyramids. You can't call that large room there a parlor. And she laughed weakly. Altogether, Mrs. Jasser impressed both Lucy and Donna Inez with the fact that she was very weak and scarcely able, as she put it, to draw one leg after the other. Both girls would have been surprised to see what a hearty meal Mrs. Jasser made that evening when she was up and dressed. Perhaps she felt that her strength needed keeping up, but she certainly partook largely of the delicate dinner provided by Jane, who was a most excellent cook. After dinner, Mrs. Jasser lay on a pink couch in a pink parlor by a splendid fire, for the night was cold and raw with promise of rain. The widow had a small table at her elbow, at which stood a cup of coffee and a glass of liqueur. The rose-colored curtains were drawn, and the rose-shaded lamps were lighted, and the whole interior of the cottage looked very comfortable indeed. Mrs. Jasser, in a Croscoe yellow tea gown trimmed with rich black lace, reclined on her couch like Cleopatra in her barge. In the pink light she looked very well preserved, although her face wore an anxious expression. This was due to the fact that mail had come in, and 3 letters brought by the postman had to do with creditors. Mrs. Jasser was always trying to make both ends meet, and had a hard struggle to keep her head above water. Certainly, since she had inherited the money of her brother, the Pekin merchant, she need not have looked so worried, but she did, and made no disguise of it, seeing that she was quite alone. After a time, she went to her desk and took out a bundle of bills and some other letters, also an account book and a blank book. Over these she pored for quite an hour. The clock struck 9 before she looked up from this unpleasant task, and she found her financial position anything but satisfactory. With a weary sigh, she rose and stared at herself in the mirror over the fireplace, frowning as she did so. Unless I can marry the professor at once, I don't know what will happen to me, she mused gloomily. I have managed very well so far, but things are coming to a crisis. These devils, she alluded to her creditors, will not keep off much longer, and then the crash will come. I shall have to leave Gartley as poor as when I came, and there will be nothing left but the old nightmare life of despair and horror. I am getting older every day, and this is my last chance of getting married. I must force the professor to have a speedy marriage. I must. And she began to pace the tiny room in a frenzy of terror and well-founded alarm. As she was trying to calm herself, and succeeding very badly, Jane entered the room with a card. It proved to be that of Sir Frank Random. It is rather a late hour for a visit, said Mrs. Jasser to the servant. However, I feel so bored that perhaps he will cheer me up. Ask him to come in. When Jane left, she stood for a moment or so, trying to think why the young man had called it so untoward an hour. But when his footsteps were heard approaching the door, she swept the books and the bills and the letters into the desk and locked it quickly. When Random appeared at the door, she was just leaving the desk to greet him, and no one would have taken the smiling, plump, well-preserved woman for a creature who lately had looked so haggard and careworn. I'm glad to see you, Sir Frank, said Mrs. Jasser, nodding in a familiar manner. Sit down in this very comfortable chair, and Jane shall bring you some coffee and kummel. No, thank you, said Random in his usual stiff way, but very politely. I have just left the mess, where I had a good dinner. Mrs. Jasser nodded and sank on the couch, which was opposite the chair in which she selected for her visitor. I see you were in mess kit, she said gaily. Quite a glorified creature to appear in my poor little parlor. Why are you not with Donna Inez? I have heard all about your engagement from Lucy. She was here today with Senorita de Gallegos. So I believe, said Random, still stiffly. But you see, I was anxious to come see you. Ah, said Mrs. Jasser, equably. You heard that I was ill. Yes, I have been in bed ever since yesterday afternoon until a couple of hours ago, but I am now better. My dinner has done me well. Pass me the fan, please. The fire is so hot. Sir Frank did as he was told, and she held the feather fan between her face and the fire while she stared at her, wondering what to say. Don't you find this atmosphere very stuffy? He remarked at length. It would be a good thing to have the windows open. Mrs. Jasser shrieked. My dear boy, are you mad? I have a touch of influenza, and an open window would bring about my death. Why, this room is delightfully comfortable. There is such a strong perfume about it, sniffed Random pointedly. I should think you knew that scent by this time, Sir Frank. I use no other and never have done. Smell. And she passed a flimsy handkerchief of lace. Random took the handkerchief and placed it to his nostrils. As he did so, a strange expression of triumph crept into his eyes. I think you told me once that it was a Chinese perfume, he said, returning the handkerchief. Mrs. Jasser nodded, well pleased. I get it from a friend of my late husband, who is in the British Embassy at Pekin. No one uses it but me, but surely some other person uses it. Not in England, and I do not know why you should say so. It is a specialty of mine. Why, she added playfully, if you met me in the dark, you should know me by this scent. Can you swear that no one else has ever used this perfume, Master Random? Mrs. Jasser lifted her penciled eyebrows. I do not know why you should ask me to swear, she said quietly, but I assure you that I keep this perfume, which comes from China, to myself. Not even Lucy Kendall has it, although she greatly desired some. We women are selfish in some things, my dear man. It is a most delicious perfume. Yes, said Sir Frank, staring at her, and very strong. What do you mean by that? Nothing, only I should think that such a perfume would be good for the cold you contracted by going to London last month. Mrs. Jasser turned suddenly pale under her rouge, and her hand clinched the fan so tightly as to break the handle. I have not been to London for quite a month, she faltered. What a strange remark. A true one, said the baronet, fumbling in his pocket of his jacket. You went to London last night by the 7 o'clock train to post this, and he held out the anonymous letter. The widow, now quite pale and looking years older, sat up on the couch with a painful effort which suggested old age. Excuse me. I don't understand, she said, trying to speak calmly. I was not in London, and I did not post any letter. If you came here to insult me, there can be no insult in asking a few questions, said Random, throwing aside his stiffness and speaking decisively. I received this letter, which bears a London postmark, by midday post. The handwriting is disguised, and there is neither address nor signature, nor date. You manufactured your communication very cleverly, Mrs. Jasser. But you forgot. You manufactured your communication very cleverly, Mrs. Jasser. But you forgot that the Chinese perfume might betray you. The perfume? The perfume? Mrs. Jasser gasped and saw in a moment how the late conversation had led her to fall into a trap. The letter retains traces of the perfume you use, went on the baronet relentlessly. I have a remarkably keen sense of smell, and as the scent is a most powerful aid to memory, I speedily recollected that you used this special perfume. You told me a few moments ago that no one else used it, and so you have proved the truth of my statement that this letter, he tapped it, is written by you. It's a lie, a mistake, stuttered Mrs. Jasser, now at bay and looking dangerous. Her society veneer was stripped off, and the adventurousness, pure and simple, came to the surface. Indignant at the way in which she had deceived everyone, and having much at stake, Random did not spare her. "It is not a mistake," he insisted. "Neither is it a lie. When I became aware that you must have written the letter, I drove at once to Jessam to see if you had gone to London, as you had posted it there. I learned from the station master and from a porter that you went to town by the 7 o'clock train and returned by midnight." Mrs. Jasser leaped to her feet. "They could not recognize me. I wore—" Then she stopped, confused at having so plainly betrayed herself. "You wore a veil. All the same, Mrs. Jasser, you are too well known hereabouts for anyone to fail to recognize you. Besides, your remark just now proves that I am right. You wrote this blackmailing letter, and I demand an explanation." "I have none to give," muttered the woman fiercely, and fighting every inch. "If you refuse to explain to me, you shall have to explain to the police," said Sir Frank, rising and making for the door. Mrs. Jasser flung herself forward and clung to him. "For God's sake, don't!" "Then you will explain? You will tell me?" "Tell you what? Who murdered Sidney Bolton?" "I do not know. I swear I do not know," she cried feverishly. "That is ridiculous," said Random coldly. "You say in this letter that you can hang me or save me. As you know that I am innocent, you must be aware who is guilty." "It's all bluff. It's all a bluff. I know nothing," said Mrs. Jasser, releasing his arm and throwing herself on the couch. "I only wish to get money." £5,000, eh? Rather a large order," sneered Random, replacing the letter in his pocket. "You would not ask that sum for nothing. You must be aware of the truth. I suspected many people, Mrs. Jasser, but never you." The woman rose and flung out her arms. "No," she said in a deep voice, and fighting like a rat in a corner. "I tricked you all down there. Sir Frank, I will tell you the truth. About the murder? I know nothing about that. About myself." Random shrugged his shoulders. "I'll hear about yourself first," he said. "I can learn details concerning the murder later on. Go on." "I know nothing about the murder or of the theft of the emeralds. Yet you hid the mummy in this house, and afterwards placed it in your arbor to be found by the professor for some reason." "I know nothing about that either," muttered Mrs. Jasser doggedly and with very white lips. "That letter you have traced to me is all a bluff." "Then you admit having written it?" "Yes," she said sullenly. "You know too much, and yet it is useless for me to deny the truth in the face of the evidence you bring against me. I would fight, though," she added, raising her head like a snake, if I was not sick and tired of fighting." "Fighting?" "Yes, against trouble and worry and money difficulties and creditors. Oh," she struck her breasts, "what do you know of life, you rich, easygoing man? I have been in the depths, and not through my own fault. I had a bad mother, a bad husband. I was dragged in a mire by those who should have helped me rise. I have starved for days. I have wept for years. In all God's earth, there is no more miserable a creature than I am." "Kindly talk without so much melodrama," said Random cruelly. "Ah," Mrs. Jasser sat down and locked her hands together. "You don't believe me. I dare say you don't understand, for life, real life, is a sealed book to you. It is useless for me to appeal to your sympathy, for you are so very ignorant. Let us stick to facts. What do you wish to know? Who killed Sidney Bolton? Who has the emeralds?" "I can't tell you. Listen, with my past life, you have nothing to do. I will commence from the time I came down here. I had just lost my husband. I had managed to scrape together a few £100. Oh, quite in a respectable way, I assure you," she added scoffingly. "Oh," on seeing her listener wince. I came here to try and live quietly, and if possible, to secure a rich husband. I knew that the fort was here and thought I might marry an officer. However, the professor's position attracted me, and I decided to marry him. I'm engaged, and but for your cleverness in tracing that letter, I should be Mrs. Braddock within a very short time. I have exhausted all my money. I am deeply in debt. I cannot hold out longer. But the money you inherited, that is all bluff also. I never had a brother. I inherit no money. I know nothing of Pekin, save that a friend of mine sends that sent to me as a yearly Christmas present. I am an adventuress, but perhaps not so bad as you think of me. Lucy and Donna Inez have heard no wickedness from my lips. I have always been a good woman in one sense, a moral woman. That is, and I did wish to marry the professor and live a happy life, seeing that I was at the end of my resources, and that Professor Braddock expected a legacy with me before marriage. I looked round to see how I could get the money. I heard that you were accused by Captain Hervey, and so last night I wrote the letter and posted it in London, thinking that you would yield to save yourself from arrest. Random laughed cynically. You have thought me a weak mess, he muttered. I did, said Mrs. Jasser frankly. To tell you the truth, I thought that you were a fool, but by tracing that letter, withstanding my demand, you have proved yourself to be more clever than I took you to be. Well, that is all. I know nothing of the murder. My letter is a sheer bluff to extort from you £5,000. Had you paid, I should have passed it off to the professor as money left to me by my brother. But now, said Random, rising to go, I shall tell what you have told me to the professor, and hand me over to the police, said Mrs. Jasser, shrugging her plump shoulders. Well, I expected that. Yet I fancied for an old time's sake that you might have been more lenient. We were never anything but acquaintances, Mrs. Jasser, said Random coldly. So I fail to see why you should expect mercy after the way in which you have behaved. You expect to blackmail me, and yet go free. I must punish you somehow, so I shall tell Professor Braddock, as you certainly cannot marry him, but I shall not hand you over to the police. You won't? Mrs. Jasser stared, scarcely able to believe her ears. No, give me a day to think over matters, and I shall arrange what to do with you. I think there is some good in you, Mrs. Jasser, and so I shall see if I can assist you. In the meantime, I shall have your cot run away. In that case, you may as well hand me over to the police, she said bitterly. Not at all, rejoined Random coolly. I can trust my servant, who is stupid but honest and is devoted to me. I'll see that everything is kept quiet. But if you attempt to run away, I shall have you arrested for blackmail. Understand? Yes, you are treating me very well, she gasped. When shall I see you? Tomorrow evening. I must talk the matter over with Braddock. Tomorrow I shall arrange what to do, and probably I shall give you a chance of leading a new life in some other part of the world. What do you say? I accept. Indeed, there is nothing else left for me to do. That is an ungrateful speech, said Random severely. I dare say, however, we can talk of gratitude tomorrow. Meanwhile, please leave me. Sir Frank went to the door and there paused. Remember, he said distinctly, that your cottage is being watched. Try to escape and I shall have you arrested. Mrs. Jasser groaned and buried her face in the sofa cushion. Chapter 22. A Wedding Present. Mrs. Jasser had thought Random exceedingly clever in acting, as she had done to trap her. She would have thought him still more clever had she known that he trusted to the power of suggestion to prevent her from trying to escape. Sir Frank had not the slightest intention of setting his soldier servant to watch. As such was not the duty for which such servants are hired. but having impressed firmly on the adventuress that he would act in this way, he departed, quite certain that the woman would not attempt to run away. Although no one was watching the cottage, Mrs. Jasper, believing what had been told her, would think that sharp eyes were on the doors and windows of the day and night, and would firmly believe that if she tried to get away, she would be captured forthwith by the Pierside police, or perhaps by the village constable. Like an Eastern enchanter, the baronet had placed a spell on the cottage, and it acted admirably. Mrs. Jasper, although longing to escape and hide herself, remained where she was, cowed by a spy who did not exist. The next day Random went to the Pyramids as soon as his duties permitted and saw the professor. To the prospective bridegroom he explained all that had happened and displayed the anonymous letter with an account of how he had proved Mrs. Jasper to be the writer. Braddock's hair could not stand on end, as he had none, but he lost his temper completely and raged up and down the museum in a way which frightened Cockatoo out of his barbaric wits. When more quiet, he sat down to discuss the matter and promptly demanded that Mrs. Jasper should be handed over to the police. But he might have guessed that Sir Frank would refuse to follow this extreme advice. "She has acted badly, I admit," said the young man. "All the same, I think she is a better woman than you may think, Professor." "Think, think, think!" shouted the fiery little man, getting up once more to trot up and down like an infuriated poodle. "I think she is a bad woman, a wicked woman, to deceive me into thinking her rich and... But surely, Professor, you wish to marry her also for love." "Nothing of the sort, sir, nothing of the sort. I leave love and such like trash to those like yourself and Hope, who have nothing else to think about. But a marriage without love... Pooh, pooh, pooh. Don't argue with me, Random. Love is all moonshine. I did not love my first wife, Lucy's mother, and yet we were very happy. Had I made Mrs. Jasper my second, we should have got on excellently, provided the money was forthcoming from my Egyptian expedition. What am I to do now? I ask you, Random. Even the £1,000 you pay for the mummy goes back to that infernal Hope because of Lucy's silly ideas. I have nothing, absolutely nothing, and that tomb is amongst those Ethiopian hills, I swear, waiting to be opened. Oh, what a chance I have missed! What a chance! But I shall see Mrs. Jasper myself. She knows nothing about this murder. She declares that she does not." Don't tell me, vociferated the professor. "She would not have written the letter had she known nothing." "That was a bluff. I explained all that." "Bluff be hanged!" cried Braddock, only he used a more vigorous word. "I do not believe that she would have dared to act on such slight foundation. I shall see her myself this very afternoon and force her to confess. In one way or another, I shall find the assassin and make him disgorge those emeralds under the penalty of being hanged. Then I can sell them and finance my Egyptian expedition." "But you forget, Professor, the emeralds, when found, belonged to Don Pedro." "They don't," rasped the little man, turning purple with rage. "I refuse to let him have them. I bought the mummy and the contents of the mummy, including those emeralds. They are mine." "No," said Random sharply. "I buy the mummy from you, so they pass into my possession and belong to De Gallegos. I shall give them to him." "You shall have to find them first," said Braddock savagely. "And as to the mummy, you shan't have it. I decline to sell it. So there." "If you don't," said Random distinctly, "Don Pedro will bring an action against you, and Captain Hervey will be called as a witness to prove that the mummy was stolen." "Don Pedro hasn't the money," said Braddock triumphantly. "He can't pay for lawyer fees." "But I can," rejoined the young man very dryly. "As I am going to marry Donna Inez, it is only just that I should help my future father-in-law in every way. He has a romantic feeling about this relic of poor humanity, and wishes to take it back to Peru. He shall do so. And what about me? What about me? Well, said Random, speaking slowly with the intention of still further irritating the little man, whose selfishness annoyed him. If I were you, I should marry Mrs. Jasser and settle down quietly in this house to live on what income you have. Braddock turned purple again and spluttered. How dare you make a proposition like that to me, sir? He bellowed. You ask me to marry this low woman, this adventuresses. This, words failed him. Of course, Random had no intention of advising such a marriage, although he did not think so badly of Mrs. Jasser as did the professor. But the little man was so venomous that the young man took a delight in stirring him up, using the widow's name as a red flag to his particular bull. I do not think Mrs. Jasser is a bad woman, he remarked. What? After what she has done? Blackmail? That is bad, I admit. But she has failed to get what she went after. And after all, you indirectly are the cause of her writing that blackmailing letter. I am? How dare you? You see, she wanted to get 5,000 pounds out of me as her dowry. Yes, and told me lies about her damn brother, who is a Pekin merchant, when, after all, he never existed. Oh, I don't defend that, said Random coolly. Mrs. Jasser has behaved badly on the whole. Still, Professor, I think there is good in her. As I said before, she evidently had bad parents and a bad husband, but as far as I can gather, she is not an immoral person. The poor wretch only came here to try and drag herself out of the mire. If she had married you, I feel sure that she would have made you a most excellent wife. The professor was in such a rage that he suddenly became calm. Of course, you talk absolute rubbish, he said caustically. Had I my way, this woman would be whipped at the cart's tail for the shameful way in which she deceived us all. However, I shall see her today and make her confess who murdered Bolton. Don Pedro will be greatly obliged if you do. He wants those emeralds. So do I. And if I get them, I shall keep them, snapped Braddock. And if you haven't anything more to say, you can leave me. I'm busy. As there was nothing more to be done with the choleric little man, Sir Frank took the hint and departed. He went forthwith to the Warrior Inn to see Don Pedro and also Donna Inez. But it is so happened that the girl had gone to the pyramids on a visit with Miss Kindle, and Random was sorry that he had missed her. However, it was just as well, as he could not talk freely to De Gallegos. To him, he related the whole story of Mrs. Jasser and discovered that the Peruvian also, as Braddock had done, insisted that Mrs. Jasser knew the truth. She would not have written that letter if she did not know it, said Don Pedro. Then you think that she should be arrested? No. We can deal with this matter ourselves. At presently, she is quiet and safe, as she certainly will not leave her cottage, seeing that she thinks it is being watched. Let us permit Braddock to interview her and see what he can learn. Then we can all discuss the matter and come to a decision. Random nodded absently. I wonder if Mrs. Jasser was the woman who talked to Bolton through the window, he remarked. It's not impossible, although that does not explain why Bolton borrowed a female disguise from his mother. That would argue some understanding between Bolton and Jasser, and a knowledge of the manuscript before Bolton left for Malta. We now know that he could only have seen the manuscript for the first time at Malta. It was evidently stowed away in the swathings of the mummy by my father, who forgot all about it when he gave me the original. Hervey forgot also, I wonder if that's true. I am certain it is, said Don Pedro emphatically. For if Hervey or Vasa, or whatever you'd like to call him, had found that manuscript and had got it translated, he certainly would have opened the case and have secured the emeralds. No, Sir Frank, I believe that this theory is partly true. Bolton intended to run away with the emeralds and send the empty mummy to Professor Braddock. For if you remember, he arranged that landlord of the Sailor's Rest forward the case next morning. Even if he happened to be away, Bolton intended to be away with the emeralds. Then you do not believe that Hervey placed the manuscript in my room? He declared most emphatically that he did not, said Don Pedro. When, at Pierside yesterday, I went to the Sailor's Rest and saw him, he told Braddock only the other day that he had lost his chance of sailing a vessel on the Pacific Ocean out across the water, and yet, as yet, had not got another one. But when he returned to the Pierside, he found a letter waiting for him. So he told me, giving him command of a 4,000-ton tramp steamer called the Firefly. He is to sail at once, tomorrow, I believe. Then what is he going to do about this murder business? He can do nothing at present. As if he remains in Pierside, he will lose his new command. Tomorrow he drops downstream, but meantime he intends to write out the whole story of the theft and of the mummy. I promised to give him £50 for doing so, as I want to get back the mummy, free of charge, from Braddock. I think Braddock will stick to the mummy in any event, said Random grimly. Not when Hervey writes out his evidence. He will not have it completed by the time he sails, as he is very busy. But he has promised to send off a boat to the jetty near Fort tomorrow evening when he is dropping downstream. I shall be there with £50 of gold. Supposing he fails to stop or send the boat, then he will not be getting any of his £50, retorted Don Pedro. The man is a rascal, and he deserves prison rather than reward. But since the mummy was stolen by him 30 years back, he alone can prove my ownership. But why take all this trouble, argued the baronet. I can buy the mummy from Braddock. No, said Don Pedro, I have a right to my own property. Random lingered until late afternoon and until darkness fell, as he was anxious to see Donna Inez, but he did not appear until late. Meantime, Archie Hope put in an appearance, having come to see Don Pedro with an account of his interview with Widow Anne. Before coming to the inn, he had called the professor and had heard all about the wickedness of Mrs. Jasser. His surprise was very great. I should not have believed it, he declared. Poor woman. Ah, said Random, rather pleased. You are more merciful than the professor. Hope. He calls her a bad woman. Huh. I don't think that Braddock is so good that he can afford to throw a stone, said Archie sourly. Mrs. Jasser has not behaved well, but I should like to hear her complete story before judging. There must be a lot of good in her, or Lucy, who have been with her a great deal, would not have found her out long ago. I go by a woman's judgment of a woman, but Mrs. Jasser must have been anxious to remarry. She was, as Professor Braddock knows, said Random quickly. I'm not thinking of that so much as of what Widow Anne told me. Oh, said Don Pedro, looking up from where he was seated. So you have seen that old woman. What does she say about the clothes? She sticks to her story, Sidney. She declares borrowed She declares, borrowed the clothes to give them to me for a motel. Now, I never ever ask Bolton to do this, so I fancy the disguise must have been intended for himself or for Mrs. Jasser. But what had Mrs. Jasser been up to with him? Demanded the random sharply. Well, it's odd. It is indeed odd. Well, it's odd, replied Hope slowly, but Mrs. Bolton declared that her son was in love with Mrs. Jasser, and when he returned from Malta intended to marry her. Impossible, cried Sir Frank. She engaged herself to Braddock, but only after Bolton's death. Remember. Don Pedro nodded. That is true. What you say, Mr. Hope, proves the truth of Hervey's theory. In what way? Mrs. Jasser, as we know from what Random told us, wanted money. She would not marry a man who was poor. Bolton was poor, but of course the emeralds would make him wealthy, as they were of immense value. Probably he intended to steal them in order to marry this woman. She implicates Mrs. Jasser, or I should say, this implicates Mrs. Jasser in the crime. Yes, assented Sir Frank, nodded. But as Bolton did not know that the emeralds existed before he bought the mummy in Malta, I do not see why he should borrow a disguise beforehand for Mrs. Jasser to meet him at the Sailor's Rest. The thing is easily settled, said Hope impatiently. Let us both go to Mrs. Jasser's this evening and insist upon the truth being told. If she confesses about her secret engagement to Sidney Bolton, she may admit that the clothes were borrowed for her. And she may admit also that she placed the manuscript in my room, said Sir Frank after a pause. Hervey did not place it there, but it is just possible that Mrs. Jasser, having got it from Bolton when she talked to him through the window, may have done so. Nonsense, said Hope with vigorous common sense. Mrs. Jasser would be spotted in a moment if she had gone to your quarters. She had to pass the sentry, remember? Then again, we have not yet provided that she was the woman in Mrs. Bolton's clothes who spoke through the window. That can all be settled if we speak to her this evening. Very good. Random glanced at his watch. I must get back. Don Pedro, will you tell Inez that I shall come in this evening? When can we talk further about these matters, Hope? I shall stop here and wish to consult Don Pedro. Random nodded and took a reluctant departure. He dearly wished, as an engaged lover should, to remain on the chance that Donna Inez might return, but duty called him and he was forced to obey. The night was very dark, although it was not particularly late, but there was no rain, and Random walked rapidly through the village and down the road to the fort. He caught a glimpse of the lights of Mrs. Jasser's cottage twinkling in the distance, and smiled grimly as he thought of the invisible spell he had placed thereon. No doubt Mrs. Jasser was shivering in her Louis Quinze shoes at the idea of being watched, but then she deserved that much punishment at least, as Random truly thought. When entering the fort, the sentry saluted as usual, and Random was about to pass when the man stepped forward holding out a brown paper package. Please, sir, I found this in my sentry box, he said, saluting. Sir Frank took the packet. Who placed it there? And why do you give it to me? He demanded in surprise. Please, sir, it's directed to you, sir, and I don't know who put it in my box, sir. I was on duty, sir, and I suppose someone must have dropped it on the floor of the box, sir, when I was at the other end of my beat, sir. It was dark as this, sir, and I saw nothing and heard nothing. When I come back, sir, I stepped into the box out of the rain and felt it with my feet. It struck a light, sir, and I found it, and I found it was for you." Sir Frank slipped the package into his pocket and went away, a grim word or so to the sentry, advising him to be more on alert. He was puzzled to think who had left the packet in the sentry box, and curious to know what it contained. As soon as he got into his room, he cut the string which bound loosely the brown paper. Then, in the lamplight, there rolled out from the carelessly tied parcel a glorious sea green emerald of great size, radiating like a sun. A scrap of white paper lay in the brown wrapping. On it was written, "A wedding gift for Sir Frank Random." Well, this is getting interesting, isn't it? Those that we thought were good turn out to be a little not so good, a little naughty, maybe even criminal, and others who we suspect know nothing know something, and now everybody knows a little something, but yet still there is more to be known, especially about these emeralds and how they came to be removed from the mummy's box and from its wrappings, and how one has now found itself in the hands of Sir Frank Random, and who has placed it there, we shall soon find out. This has been Indiana Holmes. Thank you for joining me. Until next time.
Please hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notifications button. Thank you very much.